Hello and welcome to Unacademy, one-stop destination for civil services aspirants in English. Welcome to today's The Newspaper Analysis, where we shall be discussing today's The Hindu newspaper, that is for 21st of Feb. We shall be analyzing the various different articles relevant for mains as well as for the prelims purposes. We shall be discussing each of these articles in their crux. What is relevant for the examination? How do you put an answer forward? And at the end of it, we shall also be holding for discussion two of the questions for mains examination, and we shall be discussing in brief how to go about for the answer writing. Now, before we talk about what are the topics that we are going to discuss for today, a minor announcement. So basically, this is the schedule for today's special classes for 21st of Feb. So today, we will have three special sessions scheduled at 12 p.m. where we will talk about the history revisited by Abhishek sir, where we will be talking about the McMahon line and the Chinese border dispute. At 5 p.m., medieval India will be discussed through the help of the questions. And at 8 p.m., there will be a special session for the climate conventions talking about all the various different conference of parties and the important climate conventions, very, very important for the examination. Having said that, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. So today in total, we are going to hold a discussion for 8 different topics. Out of those, 3 of the topics are going to be relevant for the mains examination. So those 3 topics, that is the Chandigarh mayoral elections, which has been put in page 1. This is an important topic which is relevant for your GS paper 2. That is something that we are going to discuss. First of all, we are going to discuss about Article 142 with the help of this particular topic. Then, having panchayats as self-governing institutions. What are the various different obstacles when it comes to the financing of the panchayats and the local bodies? And what is the way forward going ahead in order to strengthen the local self-governance? That is something which is again relevant for your GS paper 2. Then, the farm protests. So why are the farmers protesting again? We are going to discuss it in very brief. We are going to keep the discussion absolutely apolitical, and that should be the approach for all the various articles. We are going to keep the discussion apolitical. We are going to discuss the crux of the topic and what should be the way forward when it comes to the Indian agriculture, because Indian agricultural system for some time has been battling through significant amount of crises. So here, this is relevant for your GS paper 3. And in fact, it is in this area where UPSC has been repeating questions both from the portion of the local institutions and the self-governing institutions, as well as for the portion of Indian agriculture. There have been frequent questions being asked in the mains examination. Now, there are certain topics that we are going to discuss which are relevant for your prelims perspective. So, for example, blood clots and inflammation after the COVID vaccination, that has appeared in page 16. That is something that we are going to discuss. And what are the various different diseases and various different types of syndromes that are being found amongst the people who have taken the vaccination. That is something we are going to discuss. India to seek private investment in nuclear power sector, which is going to be a first. Consumers upbeat, inflation to cool. Skywalker, Hoolock, Gibbon, that has appeared in the science section, and Shashi Tharoor gets awarded with the highest civilian award of France. So these are the various different topics that we are going to hold a discussion for today. Starting with the first topic. Now, this topic which has appeared in page 1 is quite important for your examination. It has in fact been hogging the national headlines for the past day, and rightly so. Because here, Supreme Court has set aside the regular norms and the norms which have been followed till now in order to deliver what it says is a complete justice. What is this? And what is this context entirety about? So let us discuss very briefly about the background of the story. So here, Supreme Court declares Aam Aadmi Party leader as mayor of Chandigarh. So the mayoral election for the Chandigarh Municipal Corporation, which was held, was marred with significant amount of controversy. And most of you would have seen the very viral video which went viral on the various social media platforms, where the presiding officer for the mayoral election, that presiding officer Anil Masih, was seen to be publicly defacing the ballot papers. And when I say defacing the ballot papers, what does that mean? So basically, when you cast the vote, so that vote in that ballot paper, Anil Masih was seen putting a cross mark and then counting some of the votes as invalid in the context and in the pretext rather that these ballot papers were defaced. As a result of which, some other candidate, or in this particular case, the candidate put forward by BJP, that candidate won. Now, the losing candidate in that case, he approached the Punjab and Haryana High Court. Now, the petitioner in that case, basically the Aam Aadmi Party's Kuldeep Kumar, he approached the Punjab and Haryana High Court. After approaching the Punjab and Haryana High Court, basically he petitioned for holding the elections once again so that the entire election process could be repeated and justice could be delivered. Now, Supreme Court took cognizance of the issue. And Supreme Court basically was headed by the three-judge bench in this case. That is the Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud himself. You had Justice Pardiwala and Justice Manoj Mishra. Very powerful judges of the Supreme Court bench. And you have to remember, these were the three judges who were part of the very strong bench who recently delivered the judgment in the case of anonymous electoral bonds process. So this powerful bench issued a judgment, and not only issued a judgment, but before that, it basically did something which was a departure from a very regular jurisdictional process that you see till now. And again, I will say, in cases where the election process is in doubt, in cases till now where the election process is marred by various different types of irregularities and discrepancies, the courts generally order a repolling that let's hold the election process once again, maybe in camera or maybe with someone else as the presiding officer. But then these three judges, they looked at the video, which was viral, significantly viral, and these three judges basically ordered the recount. And publicly, they basically called for the various different ballot papers. They unsealed the ballot box in front of everyone. And then they started looking at the ballot papers. And thereby, they found out that in those ballot papers, there was enough evidence to indicate that the presiding officer deliberately had put the cross marks in order to invalidate those votes. Ideally, if you have to invalidate a vote in these mayoral elections or even in the case of Rajya Sabha elections, it does happen. It has happened previously also in Rajya Sabha elections, in the various different municipal corporation elections, that many of the votes have been regarded as invalid. But those invalidated votes, they are declared as invalid under the pretext that maybe some of those ballot papers have been deliberately torn, or maybe the individual who is actually putting those ballot papers, they have publicly shown the individual for whom they are voting. So as a consequence of that, those ballot papers, they are declared as invalid. But in this particular case, understand, this was a prestigious election, Chandigarh mayoral election. Now, Chandigarh Municipal Corporation, it is not that big a municipal corporation for that matter, but still has got a sizable budget of close to around 1,000 to 1,200 crores, which is not a small amount, right? So obviously, it becomes a matter of prestige. But if you consider the larger context of it, just to give you an idea, for the Bombay Municipal Corporation, that is a BMC, BMC has got a budget of close to around 55,000 crores. That gives you a context that it is important, but not that important in the national scenario. But still, in this electioneering process, there was a victor which was out of ordinary in the sense which was not expected. So Supreme Court, summoned the presiding officer, which in itself was a first. Because generally the Supreme Court does not summon people to give their own version in front of them. And the Supreme Court not only asked the presiding officer to explain his conduct, but also instigated and in fact ordered the local jurisdictional officers to instigate, or rather to put forward, a CRPC case and a contempt of court case against the presiding officer. Supreme Court could have ordered a re-election, but why did the Supreme Court not order a re-election here? What was the thinking behind it? What was the logic behind it? The logic was very simple, and that is what the judgment also talks about. The detailed judgment is yet to be released, and in the present context of the present Chief Justice, the detailed judgment is something that is quite good and pleasing to read for that matter. So once the detailed judgment comes, that will be much more enlightening. But as a matter of fact, these judges, they did observe that, look, horse trading is happening. That is, you had a few members, let's suppose, of the opposition, right? You had a few members of the ruling dispensation. Okay? Now, these also voted and these also voted. And eventually, as a result of that, an individual A was made a victor. Now, if repolling would have been ordered, maybe the election would have been free and fair. But in the meanwhile, as this petitioner had gone to the Punjab and Haryana High Court, there was already news stories doing rounds that 3 people from this part, they had defected, or rather they had moved to the ruling dispensation. So in that situation, think about it. If a repoll would be conducted, then again the same victor would have been elected, right? So the Supreme Court maintained this, that look, under the electioneering process which was held, someone was declared a victor which was not proper. If we order the repolling, because of the horse trading which is happening, again that person might be elected as a victor. That means justice is denied. And the Supreme Court maintained that maintaining this basic fundamental for electoral democracy is very, very important to maintain the edifice of democracy in a country like India. So it invoked its special powers provided under Article 142. And under the provisions of Article 142, Supreme Court takes up the cases in order to deliver complete justice. I will also talk about few of the earlier cases that Supreme Court has delivered justice in under this particular provision. But as a result of this, what happened was that Supreme Court ordered the entire ballot box to be brought to Delhi. In the courtroom, it unsealed the ballot box. The judges looked at the ballot papers. They showed them to the presiding officer, asked him very significant and penetrating questions regarding why is it that these X marks have been put. The presiding officer's argument was that, look, I had simply put an X mark to distinguish these ballot papers from the normal ballot papers so that one does not get confused. But then the Supreme Court said that other than the X mark, there is no evidence of the ballot papers being defaced. The ballot papers are perfect. So much so that the judges went ahead and even made an observation that, look, even the folds there in the ballot paper, they are picture perfect. A defaced ballot paper will not have a picture perfect fold or might have a smudge of ink here and there, but none of them are being observed here. So due to these observations, and while this entire process was going on in camera, the judges even warned the presiding officer that contempt of court proceedings shall be initiated against you if you lie in front of the court, which will now be initiated against the presiding officer. So in a first, Supreme Court did the recounting. and declared the petitioner Kuldeep Kumar as the victor for the mayoral elections. So this is the entire story behind what has been happening, what is happening, and why is it that Supreme Court made and took this drastic step. But then, here for your point of view of examination, UPSC is never going to ask you what happened in Chandigarh mayoral election, discuss in detail. UPSC is going to ask you questions about Article 142 here. So what is this Article 142 of the Constitution? So rather than ratifying and rote learning the entire article, the Article 142 basically talks about the Supreme Court exercising its jurisdiction, whereby it may pass a decree, a ruling, or a judgment for complete justice in any cause or matter pending before it, in order to deliver complete justice. That complete justice is a phrase that is very important. Now, other than that, basically for the purpose of securing the attendance of any person, the discovery or production of any documents, it is under this provision under which Supreme Court had basically called for the entire ballot box to be placed in front of it, right? So for the production of any documents or for the investigation or punishment of any contempt of itself, it was under this provision that the presiding officer, and on the presiding officer, criminal charges will be initiated now. So that is the Article 142. Now, historically also Article 142 has been used by the Supreme Court to deliver some very landmark judgments, and this is a brief about it. This again you can cite when you are writing answers for the mains examination. So the famous Union Carbide case. The Union Carbide case is for the case of the Bhopal gas tragedy. That is where it was basically talked about, and this Article 142 was exercised by the Supreme Court. The Ayodhya dispute, to deliver complete justice in the case of the Ayodhya dispute. The BCCI case, if you recall, the entire situation where the Supreme Court had basically instituted a 3-member panel to head the BCCI. Under the charges of corruption, the entire governing body was actually dissolved. So that was the very famous BCCI case where again 142 was exercised. And then you had the recent case and the famous case of the Manipur judgment. In the Manipur judgment, basically it became very famous because one of the individuals, Shyam Kumar, he defected from Congress to the BJP, and he was basically made the forest minister. Now, the Supreme Court had basically asked the Speaker to initiate the defection proceedings against that individual. But the Speaker did not initiate any of those proceedings. As a result of that, Supreme Court issued a notice under the Article 142, barring the minister from entering the Legislative Assembly. He removed that individual from the post, and the Supreme Court, under Justice Nariman, basically delivered a judgment that not only will you hold that post, you will not hold that post, and along with that, you cannot enter the Legislative Assembly anymore. And it instructed the Speaker that of the Manipur Legislative Assembly that you have to initiate anti-defection proceedings against that individual, or action shall be initiated against you. And immediately after that, obviously, the Speaker initiated anti-defection proceedings. So these are few of the famous cases where the Supreme Court has already initiated and exercised its power under Article 142. That is why Article 142 is used in very rare cases. And in fact, Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud also made a significant observation that this is one of the very rare cases that confronts us, and where the entire trust in the electoral process is at stake. He also noticed and observed not only the malpractices of horse trading, but he talked about the very base of and the edifice of electoral democracy being dependent on the trust. And it is on these bases that he initiated, and these three powerful judges, very senior judges, they exercised their power and basically instituted the petitioner and put the petitioner as the mayor of the Chandigarh election or the Chandigarh Municipal Corporation. Okay. So in this topic, in this article, we have discussed what has happened, why it has happened. We have discussed what is Article 142 and the other cases where Article 142 has actually been exercised. Now, coming to the second article, which is relevant again for your GS paper 2. It has appeared in page 10. Now, this is about having panchayats as self-governing institutions. Now, for any democracy to function properly, what is democracy? Government for the people, by the people, and of the people, isn't it? So, for any electoral democracy to function properly, you need local self-governance. Self-governance is an important part. Self-governance means that we are in charge of the decisions that are taken for our benefit. So that is why local governance has always been on agenda ever since the post-independent India came into existence. Now, it was in 1993 that by the 73rd and the 74th Amendment of the Indian Constitution, that local self-governing bodies at the municipal level and at the Panchayati Raj level, they were established. Now, significant time duration has elapsed, 30 years, 3 decades have passed. But then, their impact is questionable because many of these panchayats have been set up only for the name's sake. Many of these areas have been set up, and many of these gram sabhas, municipal corporations, etc., they are there, but they don't function as they should. The benefits of that local self-governance is hardly reaching the larger public. So that is why this article questions, where does the revenue come from? Because understand, in order to implement any of the policy mechanism, in order to bring about any welfareism for the larger public, the local self-governance or the local self-governments, in this case, the municipalities and the panchayats, they have to be financially very strong. None of them have the proper finances. It is that reason why you observe in almost all the urban areas, in almost all the semi-urban and rural areas, for example, the simplest, the drinking water facilities, they are not of the best of the standards. The cleanliness, the waste collection, that is not of the best of the standards, isn't it? So who is to blame for that? It is fair enough that the electorate or the larger public, that like you and me, we will always blame either the state government or the central government. But we don't realize that many of those things that we complain about, that comes under the jurisdiction of the municipalities and the panchayats. So even after 30 years of their coming into existence, why is it that these local bodies are not functioning as they should? The reason is simple. They don't have the finances. Where do they get the finances from? That is what this article talks about. So let us discuss the very gist and the crux of where the finances should come about, what are the sources of revenue here, and what is the way forward. But before that, a brief detail about the 73rd and the 74th Amendment. So basically, both of them came into existence. It was introduced in 1989 itself after the institution of various different committees. It was decided that a 3-tiered structure should be set up. So here, under the 73rd Amendment, basically, you had the Panchayati Raj structure, the 3-tiered Panchayati Raj structure which was set up. Now, at the base is the Gram Panchayat, okay, which covers a village or a group of villages. That is the Gram Panchayat. Then, beyond and above that Gram Panchayat, so this is your Gram Panchayat. above that, you have the intermediate level. And that intermediate level is the mandal, right? The block or the taluka level. Now, these bodies are called mandal or taluka panchayats, and they need not be established in the smaller states for that matter. But at the zilla level, you have, at the district level, you have the zilla panchayat. That is where you have the zilla panchayat. Okay. Now here, there was also a provision for the mandatory creation of Gram Sabha. And these Gram Sabhas would comprise of all the adult members which were registered and who were registered as the voters in that entire Panchayati area. They would form as the members of the Gram Sabha. And many of the powers are vested in the Gram Sabha for that matter. If you read the details of, let's suppose, the FRA, the Forest Rights Act of 2006, significant amount of power is vested into the Gram Sabha when it comes to the utilization or even, let's suppose, the diversion of the rural area lands and the non-forest lands also. Gram Sabha is very powerful. But here what is happening is that all of these are slowly and steadily rendered to be toothless because of lack of money. And this article talks about the fact that when it comes to accruing of revenue, unless and until you don't have revenue, from where will you get the money? The easiest solution and adage that everybody talks about, okay, the central government, the state government should give money. That is how they will give money. But where do the central and the state governments get their money from? So here, when it comes to the accretion of revenue, this article talks about the fact that 89% of the revenue is brought by the Gram Panchayat. And these two, they bring about close to around 7 and 4% of the revenue. So at the district level, the revenue brought by is very, very less. So where does the money come from? And why is this an issue now? So you had a situation where immediately after these local bodies were instituted, they were always encouraged to bring forward their own revenue stream. And their revenue stream, what is their revenue stream? I will also bring that into light. But they were always told and encouraged that generate your own revenue so that you can do welfare there. And that is why we hold elections, so that whosoever functions properly is re-elected again. But then, few of the states also brought about incentives. For example, let's suppose as a Gram Panchayat you have raised this much amount of revenue, we will give you funds in proportion to that. So that encouraged the people to bring forward more amount of revenue. But then the dependency shifted completely to the central and the state governments, particularly after the 14th and the 15th Financial Commission was basically implemented. Their recommendation was implemented. And this article basically points out the whopping figures which have been given. For example, initially, as per the 10th and the 11th Central Financial Commission recommendation, you had the allocation as 4,380 crores and 8,000 crores. But after the 14th and the 15th Financial Commission, look at it. You had an allocation of 2 lakh and 2,80,000 crores. So as a consequence of that, the entire focus shifted from collection of revenue to basically distribution of what is also mentioned in the article as the freebies. Because this article also talks about one dangerous fact, that in the present political context, the more you distribute, there is a better chance of getting re-elected. So what these particular panchayats are doing, rather than utilizing that revenue and generating more revenue to clean that area, provide sanitation, provide clean drinking water, they are utilizing whatever little amount of money they get from the state and the center to distribute freebies. So that freebie culture has also been blamed by the article as one of the diseases which plague the system. That is the 73rd Amendment. The 74th Amendment talked about setting up of the urban local bodies. right? So the 74th Constitutional Amendment, basically 1992, came into effect on 1st of June 1993, both of them. So this act constitutional status to the urban local bodies and issues related to municipalities. And one of the sentences relevant for your prelims examination is also the fact that the State Election Commission and the State Finance Commission were also brought about and introduced as per the 74th Amendment. Okay, this is relevant for your prelims. Now here, if we talk about the own source of revenue which is generated, what are the sources of revenue which are generated? So first of all, property tax, cess on land revenue in that particular area, surcharge on additional stamp duty, tolls, tax on profession, advertisement, user charges for water and sanitation, and also for the lighting purposes. So these are some of the own sources of revenue which should ideally have been sufficient for the generation of enough money to do the welfare job. But then that is not the case. The money accrued from this is not substantial enough. So what is it that one should do going ahead, and what should be the way forward? So financial independence is a must. Why do I say so? Apply your own logic. Let's suppose you have a local organization or a local body. Now this local body is dependent on the central or the state government for the release of the funds. It doesn't have its own funds. Now that is when the releasing of the funds, that becomes a political issue, depending upon your political alignment, your political affiliation. You shall be given the funds, or you can even be deprived of the funds. As a result of that, what happens? The independence which is required for the purpose of which the entire constitution of these local self-governing bodies was done, that in itself is defied. So that neutrality and that decision-making power, that is slowly and steadily sublet to the state and the central government. So as a consequence of that, what happens? Many of the times you will observe that these local bodies are merely the political stooges of the state government in certain cases even the central government. And that brings a lack of development. So that is why financial independence, how do you achieve that? Analyzing and increasing the tax base. Is every property which is present in that area, is the taxation given? Is the taxation done? Then state and central government should incentivize the tax collections, right? So how do you do that? By giving funds in proportion to the amount of tax that you have already collected. I will give you the grants, I will give you the funds, but collect your taxes first, and accordingly I will give that. So all the local bodies will be encouraged to collect more. Then awareness campaigns for the utilization of tax funds. This is very important. This is applicable even at the state and the central level. That is, majority of the people, they are reluctant to pay their taxes because the common mindset and the preconceived notion that many people have is the fact that why do I pay tax? If I am paying tax, some other individual or corrupt politician will take it and the government will eat it up. My tax is not utilizable, so I will keep that money to myself. There is tax evasion. So if you raise that awareness campaign, if you go to the people, talk to the masses, that look, the taxes that you have paid, that is responsible for the roads that have been built here. The taxes that you have paid, as a result of that, your area or your village, your block, your taluka is cleaner than the surrounding. That competitive nature is going to bring forward a landmark change in terms of the people who are ready to pay their tax. Now, tap sources such as investments, corporate social responsibility funds, businesses, carbon credit projects, and even donations. So all these need to be significantly tapped in order to increase the revenue process. Now, mobilization of Gram Sabhas. Gram Sabhas need to be activated in order to bring about significant more amount of money, and disincentivizing the freebie culture. Freebie culture, that distributing something for free. Because in the present context, welfareism has taken a different morphed state. Welfareism has taken a backseat where whatever funds that you have, in order to get re-elected, you start distributing things. And that is something which is prevalent in the larger political scenario as well, but the impact of it is significantly felt. So look at your urban area or your rural area, your district, wherever you are living in. Who is responsible for all the various different garbage dumps that you see around you? It is the municipality. It is the Panchayati system. And they don't have the funds. That is why regularly you come up with the scenario that there is, let's suppose, the workers strike in one particular area. Garbage is openly dumped on the road as a form of protest because the people are not paid their salaries and wages. So where does the money go? I just now told you in the previous article also, the budget for Bombay Municipal Corporation, 52 to 55,000 crores. Whopping amount, significantly large amount. Budget for Chandigarh, 1,200 crores. Similarly, budget for Delhi, higher than that. So the desired outcome is not there. Why? Because whatever money is there is utilized to appease, in many of the cases, the political bosses, the parties who have funded the election, and to ensure re-election by distribution of freebies. So that is the way forward, which you can always write in the answer. Now, coming to the next article. That is, why are farmers protesting again? Now, this is relevant for your GS paper 3. That is under the portion of agriculture. Now, agriculture is one of those areas in UPSC where if you analyze the past decade of questions, the previous year questions, you will find the questions have a common theme. The questions revolve around the theme of either the reduced farm income, farm distress, the importance of diversification of crops, and so on. Why? Because the agricultural setup is in crisis. Agricultural incomes have not increased. Agricultural incomes, what they were, let's suppose, in the 1970s and the 1980s, as compared to a daily wage earner and a labor. So the daily wage earner's income has increased in proportionality, and when inflation is taken into consideration, that agricultural income has not increased. And because of that, there is a looming farm crisis. Indian agriculture is growing at a tepid rate of close to around 2 to 3%. For a sector where close to around 50% of our population is involved directly or indirectly, that growth percentage does not do justice. Imagine if 50% of your population is involved in a sector and that sector is almost stagnant, what will happen? The wealth or the income will be very low. Per capita income will be very low. That is why you come across very frequent farm agitations and farmer protests. Now, this farmer protest is something of a reincarnation of sorts of what we observed a few years back. Now, you had the government, the central government, passing the 3 agricultural laws, agricultural bills, and the agricultural farm laws, which was an issue of a lot of contention. Now, those agricultural laws, basically at that point of time, the APMC, the Essential Commodities Act, etc. Now, at that point of time, you had the farm protest, which carried out, or the farmer protest, which continued for almost 1 year. Eventually, the laws were repealed and the protest was withdrawn. But again, the farmers have hit the streets, and again, the farmers have reached the region of Delhi. While this entire agitation is being termed as All India Farmer Agitation, But largely, as this article also emphasizes, and as the news stories also talk about, the largest composition of the farmers come from the region of Punjab and Haryana. Now, they have certain demands, and it is for those demands that regular negotiation with the central government is happening. You have 4 to 5 rounds of negotiations which have already taken place. So, let us try to understand what are the demands and what are the points of contention. So here, the demands are that there should be a legal guarantee for MSP, right? The minimum support price. There should be a legal guarantee on that. The farm loan waiver should be done. Whatever loans the farmers have taken, that should be waived off. Cancellation of international agreements impacting the agricultural sector. Any of the international agreements, let's suppose, to export a particular commodity or a particular crop to any other country, that should be scrapped if it is impacting the agricultural sector. Minimum pension of rupees 5,000 for farmers and agriculture labor. Now, these are the demands. Now, you might think that these demands are logical, you might think these demands are illogical, but regardless of wherever you stand in that entire debate spectrum, analyze these individually and let us understand the merits of them. First of all, when we talk about the law on MSP, the minimum support price, now they are asking for a legal guarantee. Now, what does that mean? A legal guarantee. Basically, that means, let's suppose, for an example, if we talk about, let's suppose, 100 kg or 1 quintal of wheat. Okay. Now, if the MSP for that 1 kg or 1 quintal of wheat is set up for rupees 2,000, just as an example I'm giving you, let's suppose it is set up at rupees 2,000. Now, you are legally bound to buy the wheat at rupees 2,000 only. If someone buys that wheat for rupees 1,500, there can be initiation of criminal charges or legal charges. Now think about it. Is that possible? Just to give you an idea, the Shanta Kumar Commission, which was set up for the agricultural sector, for the farm sector, basically in its final recommendations and in its final report had said that, look, across the entirety of the country, ever since that MSP system has been set up after the Green Revolution, only 6% of the farmers are given the MSP. 94% of the farmers across the country, they are not given MSP. They sell their products below the MSP. So is that a form of an exploitation for the 94%? Or is that the market dynamism taking over? So basically, think about it. Let's suppose the government buys this at rupees 2,000. 100 kg of wheat or 1 quintal, for easier reference, let's suppose 1 quintal of wheat is bought by the government for rupees 2,000. Now, at that point of time, why will the government buy wheat? It is not as if the ministers will sit together and eat it all. It is not as if all the food will be distributed to the public for free. Already you have the government schemes under which free ration is distributed. And that also is significantly expensive. You cannot keep on increasing that budget and that expenditure for that. But let's suppose the government has bought 1 quintal of wheat for rupees 2,000. International prices at that point of time, let's suppose the international prices at that point of time for wheat, they are rupees 1,100. So the government has bought it at 2,000. International prices are at rupees 1,100. Now, if I am a private organization, XYZ, you have various different private companies who give you rice, who give you, which is sold in the market for you and me. Let's suppose that private company, you buy Ashirwad or India Gate rice, Basmati, anything. Now that private company, where will it buy from? Will it buy it from the government at rupees 2,000? Because if the government has bought it for 2,000, the least that it will sell is at rupees 2,000, isn't it? If your cost price is 2,000, your selling price has got to be higher or the same. But in international market, the same product is available at rupees 1,100. So the private organizations, they go to the international market. Despite being amongst the largest producers of food grains, we still end up importing some of these crops. So where will all that wheat and rice end up? All that the government has bought, where will it go? The easiest solution is distribute it for free. But understand, the government is spending money to buy this, and significant chunk of money. The government has not got that much amount of income that it can keep on distributing all the grains that it has. Presently, in today's newspaper also it has been highlighted. Presently, our rice and wheat stocks, they are 3.2 times the buffer stock requirement. We don't have enough storage spaces. So, where do we get these, or where do we keep all these? The government incurs losses. The government, and in many of the cases the states, the central government organizations, the FCI for that matter, keeps these grains that it has procured out in the open, where it is open and free for all the natural vagaries to take over. Storms, rainfall, dust, mice, rats, everything. Infestation takes place. Hundreds of quintals of food grains are lost. And that is why a legal guarantee is something that the government is reluctant to provide. Ideally, the government should give the minimum support price. But that minimum support price cannot be completely disjointed with the international prices. The impact of it is something that we are seeing in the sugar sector. In the sugar sector, in the case of the sugarcane farmers, you will observe that all across the country, the sugarcane farmers have accrued huge amount of various different types of arrears. They have not been paid. Why? Because the price that is set at which the sugar will be bought from those farmers, the international prices are far lower. So the government is unable to sell that sugar it has bought. If the government is unable to sell, the state governments, they are unable to sell, means they don't have the money. If they don't have the money, the farmers don't get the price. As a result of that, there is impoverishment. One of the reasons for the deindustrialization of the sugar industry in the region of Bihar, in the region of Uttar Pradesh, and presently in the region of Punjab is because of the significantly plummeted international prices for sugar. So that is why legal guarantee is contentious. Now, farm loan waiver. Now, ideally, when we talk about farm loan waiver, before almost all the state elections, you will observe all the political parties, they declare that all the farm loans will be waived. But this farm loan waiver, it is always a kind of an expenditure on the part of the exchequer, which is not always justified. Because that, in a way, encourages irresponsible financial management. Agreed that, let's suppose 99% of the farmers, they are very honest, they will take the farm loans only for the farmland. But if I don't have to pay back the loan, if I know that today I take 5 lakh of loan, I don't have to pay back all of it, what will I do? I will use that. I will take more 10 lakh of loan. I will ask all my family members to take 5 lakh loans individually. All of that will be waived. So that in a way can encourage various different types of irresponsible financial mechanisms. That is why farm loan waiver is a no-go. Even though before the state elections, Eventually, it is promised, and it is done in many of the states, which in itself has been pointed by in the economic survey as being irresponsible. Then, it is, by the way, one of the reasons why the various different state governments, their deficit and the debt to GDP ratio has been increasing at an unsustainable level. Amongst the state governments whose debt to GDP ratio is very high, Punjab lists significantly higher on that list. Then, cancellation of international agreements impacting the agricultural sector. Now here, you have to understand that the central government, if you observe the notifications by the central government, there is huge amount of uncertainty. Huge amount of uncertainty. The wheat export has been banned. The onion export or the cotton export has been initiated again. The rice export has been banned. Again, it has been reinitiated. So, under that entire policy uncertainty, how will a farmer make a choice which farm crop to emphasize upon, which crop to grow? That is where the uncertainty is impacting the farmers. Let's suppose I know that in the international market there is a great demand for wheat, which was the case during the Russia-Ukraine crisis. I grow wheat. The central government has imposed a ban on wheat exports in order to muster its own buffer stocks, obviously, whatever might be the reason. But as a farmer, now my scope or my ability to sell that wheat anywhere, that is significantly impacted, isn't it? This has affected and impacted the farmers not only for the major crops, but even in the horticultural sector. And in the crops such as pulses, the impact or the hit taken is much larger. So that is why there needs to be a policy certainty on the side of the government in order to ensure that the farmers have a predictability about what should they grow and how beneficial or remunerative it can get. Then, minimum pension of ₹5,000 for farmers and agriculture labor. Ideally, pension is a kind of welfare fund which comes under the revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure, always advisable to reduce your revenue expenditure so that the primary deficit in the economy is reduced. So, that is where you need certain very innovative schemes and you need certain pensions, for example, the Atal Pension Fund, etc. You need to make it much more encouraging and incentivizing for the farmers, where at very nominal price, they are assured that kind of labor or that kind of labor pension or the farm pension. So that is how you can move forward. But if you have to basically compile all the processes in the way forward, so ideally what should be done is something which is crop diversification. It is a must. Now think about it. The entire agricultural setup in our country, particularly in the northwestern plains of India, those regions, they receive very little amount of rainfall. Just to give you an idea, the region of Punjab, Haryana and western UP, the grain bowls of the country, the regions which benefited significantly due to the provisions of Green Revolution, those areas, just to give you an idea, receive an annual rainfall close to around 50 to 70 centimeters, sometimes 80 centimeters. That is the amount of rainfall that they receive. What is the crop that they grow? In those areas, other than wheat, you have significant amount of rice and sugarcane. Now, rice and sugarcane as a crop, they require 120 centimeter of rainfall. How much are they receiving? 50 to 70 centimeter. There's a deficit. So why are they growing rice and sugarcane? In order to avail that MSP and FRP. FRP in the case of the sugar sector. Now, where are they compensating for that lack of rain? They are compensating it from where? From the groundwater, from the river water. That is why, despite the fact that the Himalayan rivers are abundant in terms of the water supply throughout the year, unlike the peninsular rivers, still you have the water sharing dispute which has emerged very recently in the case of the Satluj-Yamuna link canal that you would have followed in the current affairs. It is because of this reason that you will also find the situation where significant amount of issue has been observed, has been faced by the groundwater contamination and the groundwater pollution as well. The groundwater in these areas are heavily contaminated, have been heavily polluted. Arsenic, fluoride, even uranium is something which is coming in the groundwater because of excess and over extraction. So what should be done? Sustainable agriculture, grow millets, the type of crops which are suitable in that area, right? Grow horticultural crops. In fact, you had a very famous agricultural scientist in Punjab University with the name of S.S. Jol, Sardara Singh Jol, who way back in 1984 in his research paper he published, and that is public. He published the fact that the rice-wheat cycle which is present in the northwestern part of the country, that is going to be the reason for farm impoverishment, because eventually the efficiency will reduce and the soil will slowly and steadily become infertile. So if the farmers want to increase their income, they need to move to horticultural crops, where as per the research paper, the expected income can rise by close to around 7 to 12 times. So that is why crop diversification and sustainable agriculture is a significant way forward. Establishment of a true national market. The farmers should have the ability to explore the national market. It should not be the case that the crops in one region are sold at a very bottom low price and in another region at a very high price. A true national market should be there, which is presently not available in the truest form. On policy paper it is, but in truest form it is not. Then, improvement in farm logistics, transportation from farm to factory, better utilization of the price stabilization fund. You have a price stabilization fund which has been established largely to keep the prices of key ingredients such as pulses at a stable rate. Now, for the various commodities such as the crops, pulses, vegetables, etc., the government interventions which have largely taken place, those government interventions are from the consumer side, right? For your and mine benefit. That is, we should not have to pay large amount of money to, let's suppose, buy wheat or rice or sugar from the market. So if you and I, we don't pay large amount of money or a higher rate of money, the farmer gets paid even less, isn't it? So that is why the price stabilization fund should rather incentivize the farmers rather than completely focused on the consumers. That will bring about a systemic change and will bring about the support in the farm system. That will also help reduce the farm-to-table inflation. Farm-to-table inflation is amongst the highest in India. Then, after that, adopting sustainable agriculture, ensuring infra support like irrigation, which will improve the farm productivity. Still, you have almost 50% of the land which does not have access to irrigation, which is dependent upon the vagaries of the nature. So, a random cataclysmic event like a thunderstorm or western disturbance can destroy all the crops there. Or lack of rainfall, etc., can also lead to destruction of the crops. So irrigation, continuous available irrigation is a must, and mixed farming should be promoted in order to ensure and in order to basically provide an income support to the farmers in the worst of the circumstance. So this is a way forward if adopted and taken care of by the state and the central governments, that can significantly alleviate the various different farm impoverishment. It is amongst these that the government had actually set up the Ashok Dalwai Committee in 2015 for doubling the farm income. Ashok Dalwai Committee in 2015. Right. So it was under the recommendations of this committee also where these issues were talked about. It is high time we implement that. Otherwise, the farm unrest is not something which is going to subside today, tomorrow, or in the near future. Okay? Now, let us take a look at few of the topics relevant for the prelims, starting with the fact that the study finds rise in blood clots, heart inflammation after COVID vaccination. It has been found out that the COVID vaccines, now COVID vaccines were of various different types, the COVID vaccines, particularly the mRNA and CHA-DOX1, these vaccines, on whomsoever it has been administered, there have been various long-term side effects which have been felt. Now, just to simplify it for you, Covishield, the very famous vaccine manufactured by the Serum Institute, Covishield has got this kind of a vaccine, right? So what are the side effects? And by the way, this study has still not been conducted on the Indian public. This is a global study which has been conducted. So it is the result of the findings of that global committee or the global study. So here, the results have been various heart tissue inflammations, the side effects. For example, you have myocarditis, you have pericarditis, the heart tissue inflammation. Other than that, you have the very dangerous Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, this Guillain-Barré syndrome, that becomes relevant for your prelims here. This becomes relevant for your prelims. What is Guillain-Barré syndrome? So it is a condition where the immune system attacks the nerves. It is an autoimmune disease. This autoimmune disease can be basically contracted as a result of an infection, bacterial infection, viral infection, a vaccine where the person's immune system attacks the peripheral nerves. As a result of this syndrome, what happens is that your nerves, for example, let's suppose your sensory touch, that goes out of equation. Slowly and steadily, a person starts facing paralytic attacks. The entire body does not act anymore. So that is where you need to go for frequent blood transfusion and significant amount of physiotherapy to try to live a normal life. It is a significantly life-debilitating disease. Then you have the cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, where blood clot forms in the brain's venous sinuses. As a result of that, brain hemorrhage and eventual casualties can happen. So these are the diseases which are being triggered, which can be triggered. Then, coming to the next one, India to seek $26 billion in a first as private sector investment in the nuclear power sector. Now, this investment that India is seeking is to increase the amount of renewable energy that it is generating in order to ensure that its carbon footprint is reduced as per the commitments that India has made, as per the Glasgow Agreement and as per the Conference of Parties 26, which was held in Glasgow, and also as per its entire agreement for the Paris Agreement and the entire commitments that it has made. The INDC that a country makes as per the provisions of the Paris Agreement, that is the intended nationally determined contribution. Thereby, India has declared its commitment to reduce its carbon footprint. The details of the INDC, the Paris Agreement, what was the Glasgow and the Panchamrit goals that India has set, we will cover in the special session for today at 8 p.m. under the climate conventions. So do join in to understand those in greater detail. But from here, what we can derive is the fact for the prelims is the existing nuclear power sector and the nuclear power plants in India. So here, these are the existing nuclear power plants under operation. Amongst them, the largest is the Kudankulam nuclear power station. It was this Kudankulam power station which went through a lot of controversy. It was being built with the Russian help and the Russian reactors. US obviously wasn't happy, and you had Greenpeace and all staging a lot of protest for a prolonged duration for violation of the CRZ norms, the coastal regulations norms. And then the oldest one is the Tarapur atomic power plant. That is amongst the oldest one. So these are your various different nuclear power plant installations which are functional. You basically have the Rajasthan atomic power plant at Kota. then you have the Kakrapar atomic power plant, then you have the Kaiga generating station in Karnataka, then you have the MAPS in the region of Kalpakkam, and you also have the Kudankulam along with Narora. So these are the nuclear power plants, but we need many more of them because our energy requirement is increasing by the day. Then, the Finance Ministry has released its monthly report, as per which the consumers are upbeat and the inflation is set to cool down. So, the Finance Ministry has basically said that due to various different supply chain mechanisms, the inflation is set to cool down, provided the fact that during the Rabi season is the winter sowing season, winter crops, which you sow in the month of November, December, you harvest it in the month of February, March and April. So that Rabi season has basically witnessed. Now you cannot have an entire estimate immediately that how much crops have been grown. That generally follows a lag of 2 years in the best of the scenario. Now, in that Rabi season, it has been observed that the tractor sales have gone up. As a result of that, that means more crops are being grown or tilled or in a better way. The buffer stocks are around 3 times the required limit. So that means you have enough food grains. That means the food prices will come down. And then you also have the fact that the water levels in the reservoirs are significantly above the required level or at a satisfactory level, which means water for irrigation will also be supplied. So it looks good for agriculture. That means the food price. Now, vegetable prices, they are quite unpredictable because of, let's suppose, supply shocks or transportation shocks, logistic issues, or maybe even the case of climatic vagaries. The vegetable cost and thereby the entire food cost can spiral out of control. But when it comes to the grains and the supply of grains, that is ensured. Now, there has been a slight fall in the exports as per this report. But the Finance Ministry has basically termed that fall in exports to be attributable to the global economic environment. You have various different countries which are entering into the recession phase, right? So, due to that larger global economic environment, there is a kind of a supply or a kind of an export dip, which the Finance Ministry is predicting will come back to the normal in the next quarter. Okay, so these intricacies you have to keep in mind, that on what basis does the price tend to fluctuate. Then after that, in the science section, you have an image which is put for the Skywalker Hoolock Gibbon. Now, many of the times such images you observe in the newspaper and you simply flip over. But you have to understand that this Skywalker Hoolock Gibbon, that is a part or a type of a Hoolock Gibbon which is found traditionally, which had been found traditionally in the region of China. Now recently, the scientists basically have discovered significant various different groups of these gibbons even in the region of Myanmar and the forests of Myanmar. That means this gibbon is to be found in the Indo-Burma hotspot. Biodiversity hotspot. That becomes relevant for your prelims. As per the IUCN categorization, this has been put under endangered. Okay, that is the Skywalker Hoolock Gibbon. Then coming to the last topic, and that is Shashi Tharoor has been awarded with the highest civilian award of France, that is the Chevalier de la Légion d'Honneur. So that is the highest civilian honor that France gives. Now, he is not the first Indian to be given this award, but this basically significantly tells you about the improving Indo-French ties, and Shashi Tharoor basically has lived in France for considerable duration during his UN stint. So that is the highest civilian honor. What is the highest civilian honor? That becomes relevant. Okay, so that marks the end of the discussion for the various different topics. Now let us discuss the type of the mains questions which can be asked and how to frame the answers. So here, discuss the role played by the 73rd and the 74th Amendment to the Constitution in strengthening democracy in India. How can the local bodies be made more functional as the implementing arm of policy mechanism? A question as per GS paper 2, 15-marker question. So in the intro, always start answering the main part of the first question. So what is the main part of the first question? 73rd and the 74th Amendment. So in the intro, you have to talk about the 73rd and the 74th Amendment of the Indian Constitution brought into existence the local self-governing bodies in the form of the Panchayati Raj institutions and the municipal corporations. Right? This has been adopted across the country, implemented at the state level, forming three-tiered Panchayati Raj systems and urban local bodies in the municipal areas. That will be your introduction. Okay, that will lead you to the body portion of it, that what is the role played by them in strengthening the democracy. Democracy is always implemented at the grassroots. That is where you drive the body portion from. You talk about the fact that it is where you have the eventual implementation of the plans, the very basic facilities that the people get, from lighting purposes to sanitation to clean drinking water. That is the role played by them. Then the role played by the Gram Sabhas in deciding the fate of their future, the Forest Rights Act, all these examples you can give. Then you come to the second part of the question in the body itself, where you talk about what are or what can be done by the local bodies. Financially independent. They have to be financially independent. They have to be accountable. So how can they do that? That the entire way forward that we have discussed, that will be more than sufficient here. Okay. And then the next question, discuss. Now in this, how do you conclude the answer? You conclude by writing a kind of a way forward. You simply say that the local bodies form the bulwark of the proper functioning of democratic setup. Their independence, functionality, and proper upkeep is very much important for the well-being of the larger public. For that, they need to be more accountable, transparent, and least of all, functional. With that, you can end up the entire answer. Discuss the importance of crop diversification and sustainable agriculture in the context of changing market for agricultural goods. Now, in the intro, you have to talk about, or you can talk about, what do we mean by crop diversification. That can be one of the approach. The other approach can be, you start your intro by saying that the agricultural setup in our country has been going through a crisis for a prolonged duration, where 50% of the population is contributing close to around 14% of value addition to the economy, leading to reduced farm income and significant agricultural crises. That will be your introduction. After that, in the body, you talk about that this particular farm crises are basically because of the lack of irrigation, the lack of institutional support, lack of enough research and development. And the outcome of it is agricultural crisis. Then in the second part of the body, talk about crop diversification. Horticultural crops give you a better revenue, and sustainable agriculture is much more long-lasting, is much more remunerative. Growing crops such as millets in the region of northwestern part of India can not only provide nutrition to the significant larger population of the country, which has large malnourishment load, but at the same time also will provide the much needed income, reducing the farm cost. How reducing the farm cost? If let's suppose you extract less water from underground, means you have more water to spare, or you are incurring less cost, right? So that is how you can talk about it. Okay, so that is how you can write the answers. I urge you to try to write these answers and practice them. That marks the end of our discussion. I hope the session was helpful and has added some value to your already existing knowledge set. Till we meet again, do take care of yourself. If you have liked the video, please don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button. Join us again tomorrow for the newspaper analysis. Till that point of time, take care, goodbye, and thank you.